Check 1 2. Hey, we got a microphone working. All right, Nick, you got the videos ready? So, welcome everybody. First of all, thanks for sticking around. We'll get right to it so we can get ahead with our Sunday. But this was such a wonderful trip. Common Ground at the Border was what it was called. We went, mostly took place in a UCC church that we were visiting in Arizona. A group of us also went out into the desert there. A group of us went across the border to Nogales, Mexico to see some shelters and things. So there were a lot of different experiences that we each kind of came back with when we split up. And so we'll get into all the information, everything we learned, everything we experienced. But Jaime and Philomena were on the trip as well and wanted to share a few of their thoughts. So with that in mind, I figured we would start with their short little testimonies, and then we'll get into our reflections and everything else. So that sound good? Right on. Let's go.
Sorry we can't be there with you today. I just wanted to share, in the big picture, we all know that this country has never been about inclusion and diversity and equity for all. But the recent deportations and focus on migrants really brings that home in a cruel way. And I wanted to highlight something that was helpful for me. There's some things I knew and a couple that I did not about the particular relationship between Mexico and the U.S. And of course we knew, half of Mexico was taken during the Mexican-American War. But in 1882, after the Chinese Exclusion Act, 16,000 Mexicans continued to build railroads. And then Depression, they were kicked out, about 2 million. And then the Bracero program in 42 that went till 64 brought people back. And then Operation Wetback kicked people out again. And so brown and black people have been used and scapegoated and exploited. This has a personal connection for me, and I hope it has more of a connection for everyone on just a basic human level that everyone needs to be supported in dignity and safe and have housing and food. My dad was deported in the Depression. He was a citizen with his siblings. He was 2 years old. And his family was kicked out because during the Depression, Hoover made an agreement with the railroad. This is something that I mentioned to the large group. And although it's a personal story and connection, I think beyond thinking out of the box, we have to feel out of the box. And so however you can feel the connection to others who are being unfairly and cruelly treated, I think it's time for us all to feel out of the box and to step up. And that's what I expect from Pilgrim at this point, that we step up. Thank you.
Nice.
Hi, Philomena Romo here. I joined the group to go to Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Mexico in January, and it was a very moving trip, very emotional. The workshops were very pertinent and important. We hope to get the guy who made the 2 films to come out. But I was very moved by the art walk down in Nogales, where they featured death masks and children running with their parents. It was just beautiful to try to get across the border. We visited a facility that housed people who were actually homeless and countryless, trying to get across, and that was very moving. But what I was moved by mostly was the red dot map. I'm sure Josh will show you. And we met the man who made red dot crosses. All of them are red dot crosses. And what he does is he plants them out in the desert where a dead body has been found. That was a very moving documentary. Another documentary was about Shura, a woman who's 83 who's been delivering water out in the desert for like 25, 26 years. The dedication, she's just a little tiny thing, but the dedication she has to helping people just get water. It was very moving. And I really want to start something here. I'm donating this to church so that it can remind us that we need to be doing more. Thanks for coming to the forum. Peace out.
Very nice, very nice. Yes. So that particular cross, we'll start with that real quick. There is a guy that, I forget his name, but they call him the Cross Man. And you'll see in the slideshow here, a map of Arizona will eventually come up, and there's literally thousands of red dots on the map. Those red dots represent every single place that they have found a dead body of somebody who did not make it through the desert or through their journey after they had crossed. And so that is representative of the red dot that he puts on that cross. And he felt compelled as an artist to start making these crosses, going out into the desert where these bodies were found, honoring them by planting a cross at each one. He's done hundreds of them, thousands of them. Close to 3,000 crosses he has made, and he hasn't caught it. He's kind of made it like his life's work type thing. And so that is one of the crosses that he made and that we brought back, and that's what that red dot stands for. So thank you to Jaime and Philomena for donating that to us. Highlights really, Jaime had kind of brought this up, especially he's a traumatic incident, reduction specialist and chaplain, and so he works with a lot of people with trauma. And he says this is exactly what this is. It's grief work. It's learning to grieve and mourn those who not only have passed, but have gone completely overlooked and completely mistreated and seemingly not remembered. And so work like that is just one creative way that they have kind of decided to honor that and reflect that, and as almost like a grief and a protest to the situation that's going on in their area. So I thought that was beautiful. And this was also made out of by the same guy, and I think he made it out of items that they have found by people that have dropped in the desert or things like that, right?
Yeah, so this one, the black part that's sort of done like a mosaic, migrants often carry black water bottles because they're not reflective at night, so it's to hide. It's kind of gross in the day because it makes it hot and warm and gross, but it's what they do to be safe. So they find these bottles, around the desert, and so he used one of those bottles broken up to tile that heart.
Alvaro Enciso is his name if you want to look him up. That's the artist's name. So super cool and super important work. But with that, Robin, were you going to share an experience like on your field trip particularly?
A little bit.
Okay, I was going to say we could at least start with like each of the field trips that we did, what we took away from it, the highlights and things like that. And if you want to start us off, Robin.
Okay, so you want me to just stick with the field trip, or do what your questions?
This is
Yeah. All right. So Josh sent out some questions, and the first one was, "Why did you go?" And I went because I'm not very educated in this experience. I want to know more. I also wanted to be with these incredible people. Caroline, I feel like, is a goddess in this, in this migrant work, and just to kind of be able to be closer to her. And I feel all people should be treated with dignity. I feel one of my things, if we could just house a migrant, everybody house a migrant, and watch our economy collapse, because you think they're in every aspect of travel, hospitality, restaurants, farming. Anyway, my biggest surprise, what I learned, my field trip was to travel just in Arizona. And even in Arizona, we came across 3 of the crosses. And the leader was saying that the border now is commercialized. And we're like, what does it mean to be commercialized? It's completely run by the cartel. And the cartel is kind of, if you have the haves and the haves not, once again, even by crossing the border. And so many then have to go in really dangerous and other places even to get across. And just how many deaths were, and that really struck me with how commercialized it is with the cartel. Deepening my understanding. Yes, like bad faith, you realize that it is such a racist issue. It's not the white that they're worried about, it's the brown and black. and having my own kids being brown and black, you know, you just are, it's really, really sad. Spirituality play in their stories, just the fact that we all help and what we all come from. I remember as a little girl, I couldn't eat grapes. And I couldn't understand, why, Mom? Why can't we eat grapes? And it was because we were boycotting the grape industry because they were putting in such horrible pesticides and making such deformities amongst migrant children and what have you. And so the power of doing something, it changed, right? Because we boycotted grapes, they changed and they stopped using those horrible pesticides. Yes, we need another Cesar Chavez. What will I carry from this trip? Like I was just saying, one person, you were blown away by this church and the individuals in this church and the, what were they called? Samaritans in this church. They're so organized and have such passion and they have such, you know, conviction about, like Philomena mentioned in a documentary that they highlighted this one aging woman that does so much. And so just a little bit of one person can make such a difference, and our community can make such a difference, and even like the Carolines of the world. And that's what I'd like to say.
Who wants to go next? Yep, go ahead.
This over with. One of my big impressions was, I mean, again, the whole trip was amazing. Our field trips, the speakers, we saw films, we saw several films. It was just a really incredible experience. And like Robin, I really wanted to really learn more about this issue. Even though I've been friends with Caroline for so long, and I know how passionate she is, you know, the ins and outs I really didn't know about. One of my biggest impressions was they showed, I'm glad it's on there right now, and that one is getting passed around. They showed us the map pretty early on in the programs. And looking at that map, and I realized, okay, so this is where I have been. I have been on the southern Utah border. It was 2022, I think. Scott and I took our annual, I was still working then, spring break hiking trip. And we went on the way out to Saguaro National Park. We went to Oregon Pipe National Monument. And as we were heading out on our hike, it's a very remote, and it borders the Mexico border. And ton of those red dots on the map, you'll see that's right within the park grounds. And as we were heading out on our hiking, on the beginning of the hiking trails, you'll see very official signs that say, warning, you may be approached by migrants, and they may have even said illegals. I looked for a picture of the sign because I knew I took one, but I couldn't find it. It said, do not approach, do not give aid, do not give water. And it just made such an impression. And then, you know, we had that in the back of our heads, and then to go and see and hear from a woman, one of our speakers was with a large group of migrants, over 20, and 13 perished in Oregon Pipe National Monument. And I spoke to one of the humanitarian wonderful place to contribute to is Humane Borders, is one of the humanitarian groups that's in that area. And she said, oh yes, those are official looking maps are put out by the Border Patrol. The National Park can't do anything about it. They'd much prefer them not be there. But it just really, really made an impression on me. She lost half the group were perished on that trip. Yeah.
I also wanted to say one thing too, just overall, Friday was it Friday or Thursday? Everybody went on a field trip. So we all went on a field trip and a day field trip. Then the rest of the 3 days, you would go to workshops, anywhere from having folk music played by Linda Ronstadt's nephew. He even did a concert that night, to a lawyer who spoke about the issue. So it would just be workshops. Also, my surprise was there were people from all over the United States, Connecticut, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And I just love their accents. I kept saying, where are you from? Minnesota. but just from all over that were really compassionate about this project.
The other thing is it on? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say, so the woman that you were talking about, she has a book that's going to come out called On Humanizing Immigration. Her name is Dora Rodriguez. And despite all the trauma she's been through, and because of it, she is a co-founder of Salva Visión and an unwavering advocate for immigrant rights. So that was in 1980 when she was young, as she said. And she said, in particular, she does this work in the memory of two young sisters who she sort of adopted along the route. You know, they traveled together and she couldn't save them, you know. And so she continues to assist the people making the same perilous journey to safety that she made. So that, to me, was very impactful. And then I don't know if any of you have ever read any books by Reina Grande, but she's a wonderful writer. I read The Distance Between Us about her own journey. She was a child and came across with her family, and she's an award-winning writer. She was a wonderful speaker. And it, you know, there's so many people who've come across as children with their families, and, you know, they don't have status either. You know, they're the kids who didn't make it in time. You know, Trump canceled the whole DACA program. It went to the courts, and so now only the people who'd already applied and been granted it can have it, and everybody else is just out of luck. But this is something that was done by executive order that Trump can cancel, you know, and Reina Grande was one of those people, one of those kids. And recently, some of us went to a protest in Oceanside, and it was put together by a high school student. And the sign that there were a lot of great signs that the kids made. But the sign that really got me was one that one young woman was holding. And in Spanish, translated to English, it said, "I'm here for my parents who had nothing and gave me everything." And I feel like that's like it's just, it's so depressing what's happening right now. And then Josh had asked us to kind of think about what did we learn that surprised or challenged us? And I think for me, you know, I've been to Good Shepherd UCC before, but I think this time it really hit me the depth and the breadth and the length of time they've been doing this work. And the fact that they keep at it. You know, this is a long haul, right? It's more than a marathon. It's more than an ultra marathon. You know, it's been going on, as Josh said today, right? Like for hundreds of years, and they never give up. And it made me, you know, and the other thing that impressed me was how many volunteers come from their Samaritan group that they started from outside the church. They have Mormons. You know, they have people from other faith communities. They have people who aren't religious at all, who are all united. And I think for me, my own spirituality, I come to this church, I grew up Catholic, and I have to confess I'm not particularly religious. But where I feel spirit, where I feel is that connection that we all share, you know. And I feel like being together with a group of people who feel the same way, you know, we're all one, we're all here for each other, and love is the answer to everything. It's just, it was so strengthening and motivating, and I hope that we can all keep the courage that we're going to need, because I think things are going to get real ugly. Uglier than they are even now. And we're going to have to decide, which side are you on? And I know I want to be on the side of love.
So I wanted to go on this trip because I saw it as a really interesting opportunity to get what I would call a bookend experience of the immigration issue. I've been to the border here in San Diego. I had not been to this part of Arizona before. And in a couple weeks, I'm going down to Honduras My wife Karen is on a board of a nonprofit that does microloans to women starting small businesses in Honduras. And so that's the sort of bookend experience that I'm describing. And I think for me, I like to think of myself as someone that is thoughtful. And there are thoughts that I have had, that perhaps some of you have had about this issue of immigration that maybe we don't feel that comfortable with. So, for example, is it right to leave water in the desert? Does that encourage people to make a dangerous journey that they wouldn't have previously made? That's a reasonable question to ask. And one of the most impactful experiences that I had there was one of the speakers who is a Native American that does this ministry work. And if you look at the map, there's a big reservation right there on the border, and a lot of those red dots are on the reservation because, of course, there's less access to that area by ice than in some of the other areas. And I don't remember exactly how he put it, but he said something to the effect of, can't we agree that we don't want people to die? Where is, let's try and find that common ground on the border. And if we can just agree that we don't want people to die, then we have something to start with. And I thought that was a really impactful statement for me. And one of the really interesting things I thought about was that a lot of these people in this congregation that are doing this work, they're what we would call snowbirds. They are migrants themselves. They are climate migrants. And just the connection there, I think, is really interesting. One of the other things that was really fascinating to me is just to realize that this part of the world was actually part of the Spanish Empire longer than it has been part of the United States. So essentially 1521 to 1821, this part of the world was part of the Spanish Empire. For a short period, it was part of Mexico, and then it became part of the United States. So that the history of this area is something that I think a lot of us don't really get in school. And I think, what the experience did for me is it made me realize immigration is an even more complex issue than I thought. It is incredibly, incredibly complex. And ultimately the question that I'm asking myself is, there's a legality question and there's a morality question. And it is, again, to me, a completely reasonable position to say there are people who are here in this country that are not here, quote unquote, legally. That is a fact. That is a true statement. And it is a reasonable position to say, should they be removed? That's a legality question. The moral question, though, is, I think, what we as the spiritual community are really struggling with. And the thing that really struck me was to think about, there was a time in this country where slavery was legal. There was a time in this country where aiding people that were trying to escape slavery was illegal. And there were people, many in spiritual communities, who said, that is not a just law. And my spiritual faith is calling me to taking the moral issue as opposed to the legal issue. And it's very complex, and I haven't figured it out yet. But I think thinking about it in those two things is important. And the last thing that I'll say, one of the takeaways for me is I am, there's legal, there's sort of the moral question, and then there's the economic question. And I studied economics in school. Almost every single economist you speak to will tell you the data is overwhelming. Migrants are a net positive contributor to our economy. It's our immigration system that is broken, that is not able to recognize that value in a way that works.
I probably, based on some of the pushback I got from my sermon this morning, I probably should have led with that, James. So we don't want people to die. Yes, the legality and the morality question for sure. Thank you all for that. I'll just share a little bit of my own, and then we'll get to some questions and what kind of we're looking to do as a church community based on what we came back with and what we've already been doing. So I think the biggest, well, I'll start with what I was surprised about, and that was the culture of these border towns. I know, like, Missouri boy here, I'm still getting used to the culture here, even from even northern LA to San Diego area, and just how much the culture of the border interacts. I mean, even being here for 2 years, I didn't realize there are people that work on both sides, that are from both sides. There are Mexican people who come across to work in the U.S. There are U.S. people that go across the border to work in there. There are kids who go to school who are from Mexico on this side of the border and they have to go back. We ran into some of them when we were crossing back over. That was completely surprising to me, and I had no idea. And some of you were kind of kidding me, too, of like, I wrecked my car, and they were like, well, why didn't you just take it to Mexico? I was like, I didn't even think about that. So the cultural interaction of border towns is just fascinating to me, and it speaks to a lot of the misinformation, I think. The false narratives that the rest of the country is getting through major media outlets, that there is an invasion, and these sorts of things, that criminals are, crossing the border, and that is overwhelmingly just not the case. And people in the border towns who are living that every single day, it's a completely contrasting reality to them. They interact with it every day. There's no invasions, besides the militia groups that are going to sabotage the water places out in the desert. That's the only invasion that is taking place. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me personally. I think what was the most impactful was going across, and I almost went with a message or a passage in my sermon this morning that was from Ezekiel that says, like, you have whitewashed your walls around the city. It is a facade, and it kind of spoke to that. It was a condemning prophetic passage, so I kind of steered away from it. But the wall is there, yes. When you go to the other side, there is all of this art that has been adorned on the wall. And a lot of it is expletives in Spanish, which respect. But a lot of it is like murals and all these beautiful renditions of protest and resistance and defiance. But talking to Shura, she told me a story about how they actually do, in places, paint the wall white. Why do they do this? To make it easier for the cameras or the Border Patrol agents to identify when somebody is moving, so they're easier to see. And so I looked that up that night because I got curious about just the art and the wall and the different movements that it has done. And based on that, there were people that instead of painting it white, painted it sky blue, so that it was as if the wall wasn't even there on the Mexican side. And that was such a beautiful thing to me, of like, what an act of defiance, what an act of hope, of bringing this to, where it should be. But all in all, that was what I took away. So, do you have something else you want to add?
Is sort of my field trip, I did a water drop, and there was a cross, like from here to the door, maybe just beyond the door, where someone had died, a cross about this big. And one of the militias had destroyed, or maybe Border Patrol, because Border Patrol does it too, had destroyed this thing of water. And so someone had died because someone did that. And it was just so, for me, it's impossible for me to understand that, how somebody could do that, knowing that it's going to save some. Like you said, can't we just all agree that people have the right to live?
So moving forward, as a community, I think what to expect. We're going to lean into more opportunities like this, and it's not like we're going to, like Caroline said, they've been doing, this church in particular and the organizations they work with have been doing this for years and years, decades now. And so there's a lot of good work that we've already kind of partnered with people with that I think we want to just lean into more. And whether that's continuing just taking water down to some of the different sites and getting a team of people to continually do that on a weekly basis. That's a very easy, just 40-minute drive there, 40-minute drive back, drop off water. You just saved, or aided how many different people. That's the number one thing that these different sites that we've worked with in the past have asked for. So I definitely want to keep doing that. I'm in communication with a buddy of mine who does water drops in the middle of the desert. That could be a way that we go as well. Caroline has provided a few different shelters and things on the other side of the border that potentially we could get involved with. So that's, as a community, what we're looking to do, at least at the border, and keeping in mind different opportunities to resist protest. And if they start doing drops again in our area, who knows what's going to happen with all that, the way that everything's going. But either way, we'll be there to respond in some form or another, and I'm looking forward to leaning into those opportunities with you all. So anybody else have anything that they want to add before we do questions? Floor is. Oh, yeah.
The other part of this is advocacy. So what things can we push back on? Because it's great if we can help somebody live another day, but what we'd really like to do is we want to change the narrative, right? And we want to change this system, this horribly broken system, in whatever ways we can. So even though things look really hopeless right now, it's still important to always stand up, to always advocate. And we get regular notices from like Church World Service, from the UCC, from immigration coalitions and things about legislation that's coming up. And it's really important that we keep contacting, even though we think maybe that our senators, that our representatives are on our side, or on the side of love. It's not always the case. So it's really important also that we give them cover, because they're getting crap from people who don't think any immigrants should be here. People who, well, we know. So we'll be sending stuff out regularly, and if you don't attend this church and you want to be on a list, or if you do, that's something to let Josh know so that we can put you on like a rapid response list so that we can all respond. But like if you can put your elected officials on your cell phone, where you can like be driving to work and say, hey Siri, call Representative Levin, because he just voted yes on the Laken Riley Act, which they can deport someone simply for being accused of anything, but in particular, like somebody could be at the store, their kid could throw something into the cart. That would ever happen to you, it happened to me. And that person could get deported with no trial, with no due process, nothing, which is unconstitutional. But anyway, so yeah.
I agree with the advocacy, and it, you know, a lot of it is just the narrative, and Josh mentioned that, the narrative that we're given on mainstream news, too, about, you know, this narrative about criminals and the drug trafficking. I know Trump is really big on talking about that, but we learned that really, literally 0.01% of drugs are coming across the border on the backs of migrants. It's so minimal. But even with our circles, you know, when you hear that, because I know, you know, we hear pushback from even in our, you know, circle groups.
Go ahead, David. For sure.
Like a lot of people post it. Obviously, you don't want to be the one posting it if you're housing an immigrant. So you want to post it all over the neighborhood, and it says, "Do not enter without lawful search or warrant." That if the, you know, immigrants or the patrol people, what are their names? Senior ICE come to your door, you do not have to open it. You know, they have to have a, you know, a warrant.
Signed by a judge, not an immigration warrant, not a border patrol warrant.
Right.
And so they'll show something official and people think they have to let them in, but they don't. They don't have to let them in unless it's literally signed by a judge. So it's a completely separate thing from an immigration warrant. Yes, and I just ordered 500 more.
Yes. Yes, it has to say their name and yeah, for sure. David, do you have a copy of that document? I have something like it, I think, and we do have the red cards, like we said, that we've ordered. The script. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. I'll check that. Okay, I'll check that out. I can send it to people, and like Caroline said, we've ordered a bunch of red cards. Martha's already taken a whole bunch of them and handed them out, and you're all out. So great job, great job. And those can be helpful as well. So Cindy had a.
When ACLU or some of the immigrant rights organizations do Know Your Rights presentations, they actually will put something up that shows the difference between like an administrative warrant from Border Patrol and a warrant signed by a judge. And maybe what we need to do is send a copy out to people that they can share. That's another thing. I'm pretty sure National Immigration Law Center has that. But if not, I'll get a copy.
I think, Missy, you want to go? And then I got Linda. For sure, for sure. And I've been on a few different calls that have said, don't even open the door unless, like, they can slip that underneath to show you. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, yeah. So that's another cautionary thing, too. But go ahead, Missy. There we go. Mm. Okay. we'll link that. I'm going to send a follow-up email with all this. So. Yes. All right. Missy, question?
Always date and time, because that stuff makes the rounds and then people are afraid to even go out or take their kids to school. You know, there's been a lot of that, and maybe even some people posting fake stuff to scare people. So it's really important. There's a group in North County called Alianza Comunitaria, and they are doing patrols and stuff. So that would be probably who to let know in North County. The San Diego Rapid Response isn't really going out. Because it's by the time people get there, usually they're gone, or it'll be like they were at 7-Eleven getting coffee. So they have a number where people can get legal help afterwards, but they're not really doing immediate response anymore. But Alianza Comunitaria, I think, is trying to do that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Yeah. That's a great question. It is. That's a great question, too.
Yeah, because we didn't talk about that. I don't know if everybody knows that they canceled sensitive locations.
Yeah.
So previously, schools, hospitals, sorry. Previously, schools, hospitals, churches, I think medical clinics, I might be missing something, were considered sensitive locations where, unless they had a really like egregious, violent person in there, they wouldn't go in. And that was like one of the first things they said, we're not doing that anymore. So they really haven't come into churches in decades, really, for the most part. They've waited outside. They've done a lot of sneaky stuff, but they haven't come right in, so. But, it would not be a good look for them. So it's one of those things we have to think about.
But it's a smart idea to have them in churches and schools.
Yeah,
especially
so that everybody
because
knows.
Kids are not going to school. Some of the kids are not going to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a big problem already.
Mm. I was going to say, yeah, that could be a good start. Go ahead, Bill. Yes. At the point of entry, obviously there was abundant on both sides, but photos like this, we're kind of walking more in town towards things, and you would see Border Patrol cars every now and then, and there were towers. Some of them weren't even manned, or I don't know if they take shifts or anything, but it was kind of, if it wasn't at a point of entry, it was still kind of scattered where we were. That was a more populated area, and we didn't meet with any of them either, so yeah. No. I mean, we maybe saw a few walking the streets, but that was because they were either on lunch or off duty or whatever. But it is a big town. It is a big town, actually. Yeah. So. Yes. Yeah. Just to Nogales on the other side. Yep. Yeah. A half mile or two. Yeah. Yeah.
Why you have to keep going?
Yeah. 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 Yep. It's like some Hatfields and McCoy stuff right there. Yeah, it just depends on where we were in the city, so it was. We hung out most of the. Yeah. Straight desert. Yeah. Hardly any shade.
I mean, some of it's mountains.
Rugged. Yeah. Seriously.
Mountains. Even here in San Diego, some of it is really, really mountains. Very hard for border control, for the migrants to negotiate.
Yeah.
People have been pushed, right? They're pushed into these areas where
Yeah.
they think nobody's going to go, but obviously they don't have to. And they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could just be my phone. It could be the lighting too. Like little hot spots.
Use their cell phones to call, but the first thing they want to do is to call them.
Oh, you mean part of the work that people are doing? Well, we did that in Oceanside.
Yeah.
So when the Border Patrol was dropping people off by the hundreds, just dumping them, they would dump them, they wouldn't tell them what state. They thought they were still in Arizona.
Yeah.
They were bringing them from Arizona, dumping them in Oceanside. And so a whole group of people came together. And also telephones, people immediately all their phones were full. They didn't know where they were getting, chargers, there were chargers there. And there are a lot of people getting everything stolen on the way up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another. Yeah.
Sure, that's one of the things. And when they had CBP 1, which Trump canceled, not that it was the greatest program because it was really hard to get in over, even if you had good internet, but there was a program under Biden called CBP 1 that allowed people to apply. They weren't allowed in anymore. They had to apply from Mexico or whatever country. So people needed internet to be able to do that. So that was something that people in Mexico were providing to a lot of people, trying to help out with that. And then he right away canceled that, so that he literally canceled it as people were waiting for their appointment that they waited a year for in some cases. Just boom, no more. Even though they waited, they did everything they were supposed to do. Boom. That's what the emails are about now that I think about it. It's because another thing, there were 10,000 people who'd been approved for refugee status. That means they were really vetted in either their country of origin or whatever refugee camp they're in. And one fell swoop, boom. Even the people who were approved, nobody can come. So that's another thing, and that's what the contacting your Congress people is about. And you'll get something from us soon. Because we really want people, emails are great, but honestly, phone calls are the best thing you can do, or in-person visits. They have a lot more impact. If you can do that, that's much better.
Nice. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
We had a speaker from the reservation, and he was one of the people who puts out water, and he was the one who Josh quoted, who said, can't we just at least all agree that everybody deserves not to die? And I think even on the reservation, there may be mixed feelings.
Well, the
You know.
said no.
Yeah, yeah.
Against it.
Yeah, the concern that he shared was that the reservation is concerned that by not cooperating with ICE, that could then impact their sovereignty and some of the things that they're able to do on the reservation. So it is a tricky issue even on the reservations.
Yeah. And once again, that speaks to the complexity of this issue. There are multiple marginal groups that are being exploited and misrepresented and are fearful, and it stifles cooperation, it stifles organization, it stifles humanitarian aid even. And that's what we're facing. Yes. All right, it's been a long morning, getting pretty late here. Do we have one more question we can field? Sure.
That I thought was so powerful that they said they don't want to come, they have to come. And one of the videos that we saw was a 4-year-old that migrated up, and they did not know where her parents were. And she was 4 years old. And then she just kind of got connected with another group that was migrating up.
Such a common story. Go ahead, Diana. We'll close with yours. Indeed. Indeed. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there we go. There we go. All right. Hey, thank you all for coming and sticking around. To be continued. Look for an email with some of the resources that we've kind of collected. And any questions, concerns, anything else, just holler. So, yeah, exactly. There we go. See you tomorrow at the protest. There we go.